Hello, this is Miss Andrea, and today we're going to just do a little countdown so that we can ease into this live stream. I want to give people a chance to log in and get on board. In the meanwhile, I'm going to have some questions that I want my audience to consider. Please, write them down on a piece of paper. You can comment in the chat also if you please. But feel free to just ponder the questions that are being presented in the countdown. I think you'll enjoy this video. Just give us a few minutes to get set up and for people to get on board. Once again, this is Miss Andrea. I'm giving people a chance to get settled in and logged into the live stream so that I'm not talking for a half hour before people join. So please enjoy the slideshow. Please ponder the questions that you see on the screen, and we will be with you shortly. Feel free to write the answers to the questions in the chat, or if these answers are private, because they kind of are, feel free to just jot them down in your journal, because we're going to go through these questions once the video starts. Hello, this is Miss Andrea. I will be with you in 8 minutes. In the meantime, please ponder the questions that are showing up on the screen. Write them down in your journal. If you want to answer one in the chat, absolutely feel free to do that as well. Comment, let me know where you're from. In the meanwhile, we will be with you shortly.
This is Miss Andrea. We'll be on in just 2 minutes. In the meanwhile, check out the questions, write them in your journal, leave a comment, let me know where you're from. We'll be right with you. Hello, this is Miss Andrea, and this is a little weird for me. I don't know where to look because I have so many things going on my screen with doing this with the background and frame. So this is not the live stream I had planned for this week. I had planned on having my audience pick my topic, and there are polls going on my posts page. If you go to my main page, you'll see my uploads, you'll see my lives, and then you'll see my posts. And the last 2 posts give you an opportunity to choose my next topic. However, this has been a very bad week for my family. And I'm still making a video because I'd rather just be doing something than just sitting around. But we lost our patriarch this week. My husband's father passed away. And it just got me thinking about parenting, about parenthood, and what that means. And what that means to education. Because what am I if I'm not all about education, right? So I just want, I wrote down things that are important to me. As anyone who watched the first few 15 minutes saw,
the questions come across the screen. And I don't know if I'm going to make it a whole hour. There are things to do, there are people to see, there are places to go. But, I just wanted to dedicate something to him. And I really want to discuss this. So, this is kind of about the life of a parent educator. Homeschoolers know that they're parent educators. And I feel like a lot of people who do traditional schooling may not necessarily um, understand that they are parent educators. My friend Nikita knows that she's a parent educator. She absolutely does. I'm so in awe of how she approaches parenthood. So let's talk about this. Yeah, that's me. Um, how do we see our role as a parent? Um, I'm a parent of adults at this point. So my role as a parent right now is a little different, but let me think back to how I saw my role as a parent when they were young. The most important thing to me, and a lot of people didn't get this about me, was I felt like my most important role as a parent was to create an atmosphere of peace. Um, we weren't going to correct children unnecessarily. We weren't going to correct them we weren't going to correct them harshly if they didn't understand that they had done something wrong. We were always going to be gentle about how we raised and how we treated our children. Um, my son tried to stick a pen in a light socket, and his godfather was sitting next to him. And I reached over and I took the pen. Didn't say anything. I just took the pen and I said, "Ouch, burn you." And his godfather said, "Oh, I was gonna let him do it. He'd only do it once." And while I got my friend's approach to parenting, um, it didn't fit into my gentle parenting mode, right? Um, I understood that nap time meant lay down time, but I never understood how people thought you could force a child to into unconsciousness. Like, can you make someone actually fall asleep? So nap time wasn't like go to sleep or else. Nap time was more like it's quiet time and we all gonna lay down and take a minute. And if you fall asleep, great. You know what I mean? And so that was what I saw my role as a parent was to protect their hearts, to not frustrate the children, to teach them as gently as I humanly could. Most people see this video after the live stream is done, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, at that point, please go ahead and leave a comment um, and let me know how you feel about these things. And anyone who's watching right now can absolutely do the same. So I want people to write down a list of parenting goals. This is what my husband and I did when we were pregnant. Oh, when I was pregnant, right? Um, and the goals were at that time to raise them with the things that we loved about our childhood. Um, I belonged to a family church growing up. A family church, a church that's maybe 100 people, but made up of maybe a dozen families. And that was important for me to find that when my children were small. And we kept that most of their lives. Um, so a family type church was very important um, to make sure they got a really good education, to pay really close attention to their education was important, to make sure the right people were mentoring them and to keep people who we saw were harsh, disgruntled, unhappy, and just generally overall negative, to keep them at an arm's distance. Yeah, your friend group's going to change when you have kids. It is, because things that we'll put up for ourselves, we shouldn't be putting up with for our kids. Um, we had a weird goal that just came from both of us having really large families and from our families being very generous and letting people stay with us throughout our lives. Our goal was to never displace our child from their bed. Never let someone stay for a month if that was going to put our children out, because for both of us, that caused some attachment and ownership trauma. And so our goals were like that. Your goals might be completely different, might have nothing to do with that. But we were literally examining our lives and going, not going to do that. That was a good one. Going to do that. Um, and that's how we approached writing down our list of parenting goals. And so I strongly encourage you to do the same. um, what do you think is your biggest parental responsibility? Nikita commented that my biggest parental responsibility is loving, nurturing, and educating my child. My parents used to joke that their biggest responsibility was to get us to 18 alive. Now, we were crazy kids. There were bike stunts. We lived in a city called Yonkers, New York, that was incredibly hilly. And we did things with skateboards that shouldn't have been happening, and sleds. And it was all about momentum sports for us. So my parents were quite serious when they were saying that they were just trying to make sure we didn't kill ourselves, before adulthood. And that's great. Um, in the homeschooling community, that I kind of raised my kids in, most people would say that their biggest responsibility is to make sure their children become um, happy, functioning adults, um, who contribute to society. And that's super admirable. I think, mm, I like to keep things real bite sized and simple. Um, and I felt like, and I still feel like, my biggest parental responsibility is to not mess up what God designed. Or whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in the universe, whether you believe in a higher power. Our children are kind of created with all the stuff cognitively, gift wise. They're wired in a way that's gonna prepare them to, they're wired in a way that's gonna prepare them for what they're supposed to be doing as an adult. And I felt like my biggest responsibility was, if my live stream is not working, there's nothing you can say about it. I like a thumbs up because someone just texted me and asked me if it was over. Um, so I'm asking them to elaborate. So we felt like our biggest responsibility was to not mess up, was to not tamper with their design. Does that make sense? Um, my daughter is straightforward and matter of fact, and says things in a way that adults didn't necessarily appreciate when she was a little one, you know? And sometimes I didn't appreciate the way she voiced whatever she was feeling. And I'd get that look, and I was about to say something, and my husband would go, don't squash the baby. Because we can keep a child in line to the point that they lose their voice. And then when they become an adult, they have to gain that voice back. So, on one hand, we're like, these are humans. They're distinct little people with their own minds and their own hearts. And let's not train their natural way out of them. And we really saw that as our parental responsibility. The youngest is 24, and I can see, the test is almost complete, and I can see where me biting my tongue and me encouraging her personality forward has come to fruition. You know how Black people call their children mama? Like, I literally call her that, and sometimes I mean it because she's just a little maternal with no children, human. Um, she's taking good care of us this week with what's going on with my father-in-law passing, which is why I'm doing a video on parenting. Um, she just has a way of knowing when someone needs something and taking care of them. She also has a way of calling people on their stuff as gently as humanly possible. But we saw that in her. And as a child, people would think that needed to be squashed. And many people told me to whip her tail. And I was like, no, I want to see where this goes. And that's what my husband and I often said is, let's just sit back. Let's not mess with their wiring too much. And let's see where that goes. We really did, which is why we kind of ended up homeschooling because of these, bleh. Which is why we kind of ended up homeschooling, because we saw that things that were going on in school were messing with their natural wiring, and places where they had been outgoing, they were pulling back. And we didn't want that to happen. And so we made decisions based on what we decided as very young parents would be our biggest parental responsibility, right? So what role does education play in your parenting? Well, as I just said, we made a decision to homeschool so that our goal as parents weren't derailed by well-meaning teachers and administration. Personally, for me, I remember um, after the whole fiasco that I have many videos on, that was kindergarten and first grade, I landed in Catholic school in grade 2. And the nuns made me neurotic because I got a lot of speak up, speak up, speak up. Why are you speaking so loud? Why are you speaking so directly? Don't speak to me in that tone of voice. Speak up. And I just stopped. I mean, I already was selectively mute for kindergarten and part of first grade. So just as I was starting to find my voice, the nun shut it back down. And I just didn't ever like want that to replay anything like that for my kids. So my choice to homeschool um, was a direct result of the goals I had made as a parent. Delana says, good point, Andrea. Public school was squashing my oldest child. Thanks to homeschooling, he didn't lose his voice and is now in a great career. So see, that's amazing. I'm not saying you have to take your kid out of school to make sure that they don't lose their voice, but if you see that they are losing some sparks about them, you're gonna have to intervene and let people know what's what, you know, because your child has to see you intervene to know that they're not wrong for being how they are, and that way they can still stand in who they are. But, if you have to make a big U-turn in education to meet your goals as parents, then that's what you have to do. I'm going to go a little bit further and say that, well, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, and that's that education, um, homeschoolers know that education and parenting go hand in hand, but a lot of traditional school parents don't necessarily know that. Um, but it really does. Um, Everything you do, everything you say, every situation you're even in as a family, your professional life, your private life, everything your child sees, everything you do is an education to your child. And they're taking notes, and they're either going to do what you've been doing, or they're going to make a mental note to never do that, right? So let's play a little game, and let's make a list of things that you know that you have taught your child to do. I taught my child to feed themselves, first with their fingers, then with a spoon, and then we moved on to a fork, right? I taught my children to tie their shoes, right? Um, I taught my kids to write in DOS prompts in computers before we had computers that just magically came on and the Googles came up and then we could type in a URL. Before that, you had to get on the computer and type, oh, what was it? It wasn't HTTP. I think CD backslash something something reader rabbit. So I taught my kid to type in DOS prompts to pull up the little reader rabbit program, which in turn taught them to read and do math. And that was by age 3. So, like, we teach our kids. We do. We are their first teachers. And I think a lot of us embrace that well because it's natural without even knowing that we're doing it, and without even actively doing it, we're teaching them to speak, right? Because each child speaks the language of their parent, and they often speak with their parents' accents and inflections. So um, I had to learn to speak clearly when my daughter started spelling because I realized she was spelling like I spoke. And I was like, what is with this creative spelling? And then I read her writing out loud and I was like, that's my accent. And so I started speaking purposely very clear during that time that she was learning to spell. Yeah. So, yeah, we teach our kids constantly. And so we have to be mindful that this is what we are doing. So, what is the most important thing that you have taught your child? Um, some of the most important things that people say are they've taught them to value themselves, they've taught them to value others, they've taught them independence, they have taught their children to be curious and to think critically. Y'all, everybody teach your children to think critically. We're living in an age where we parrot each other and we don't think critically. They've taught them emotional development and self expression. We've taught them self discipline, where they get to a point where you don't have to keep correcting them. They know right from wrong and they follow it. Social dynamics, psychology. Someone taught their child psychology? Okay, that's interesting. What do they mean by that? Um, the psychology of happiness. Okay, that's what they meant by that. Yeah, you can teach children to be happy. I remember when my son was maybe fifth grade age, something would happen midday. Be having a marvelous day. And then maybe 2 o'clock came around. and something happened that rattled him. And he'd say, I'm having the worst day. And I'd say, no, you were having a ball until 2:07. You're having a bad moment. And so that's an important lesson to keep a child from throwing out, I guess, the baby with the proverbial bathwater. Just because this 5 minutes or this 10 minutes sucks and I need to take 15 minutes to recoup, it doesn't mean your day is rotten, because what'll happen if you let them do that, then the rest of the day stays rotten. And I was able to check that and check that tendency to just spiral and pull it back. So yeah, I guess psychology is important. Oh, and we teach them economy. Let me tell you, those aisles, those end caps in the grocery store are so stinking frustrating, because they give your children a case of the gimmies. And there are two things I did to teach them economy. And the first was to say, did you want that before you saw it? Is it useful to you? Why do you need it? How about this? How about we go home and think about it? And if you still want it in 2 days, then we'll talk about it again. They forget about the thing, right? And number two was I started giving them an allowance and refusing them to my lips. I started giving them an allowance and refusing to buy them anything. So you have money. If you want it, you buy it. And they look at it and they look at their money. They'd be like, no, 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 I'm good. I'm good. Giving an allowance is the biggest way to save money, and teaching them optimism. That's very important. What is the most important thing? What is the most important thing? I may have erred in teaching my kids what I thought was the most important thing, because I taught them that they didn't need another parent, another person to complete their lives. I taught them that they have their parents to fall back on if they're ever in a jam, and they have each other to be each other's confidence. And if you find someone else that fits into your life, then that's gravy. And they haven't started looking into gravy, and they're both in their mid-20s. So we're like, oh no, we may have done too good a job on self-esteem. Oh boy. But yeah, for me, that's the most important thing that I have taught my kids. I'll let you know in 5 years how that went. What is the most important thing that you will ever teach your child? Um, and honestly, for me, in their mid-20s, I like to think that I already got that in. Um, and I think it was to value intelligence over all else, over all else. And this is something that I make sure I not only teach my children, but I teach all my extended children, my kids' friends, my nieces, my nephews, especially my nieces. Yes, I know I said nieces twice, but whenever a niece comes to me and says, "Hey, I met a guy," I say, "How smart is he?" Okay, I realize how that sounds, but that's what I want to know. I want to know, how smart is he? And I'll tell you why. And they'll say, "Oh, this is his education." And I'm like, I didn't ask about his education. I'm asking you if he's smart. Does he do dumb things? Does he say silly things? Does he belittle your education? That's the most important thing to me, especially with my young women, is um, you need to value education, and you need to value education in the people around you, because you don't need to be tying your life to someone who is threatened by your intelligence. Because my people are intelligent, I make sure of it. But I want anyone who I'm sorry, there's something in my eye. I make sure that anyone who they want to tie their lives to is smart enough to not be threatened by their education. Guy with my son or my nephews, um, girl with my son or my nephews, guys with my nieces and daughter. Um, I just want them to look for education as a measure of attractiveness, and not just school education, not bachelor's, master's, PhD, street smarts, um, business acumen, emotional quotient, y'all, emotional quotient, um, security within themselves. Um, old souls. We look for old souls, people that have the wisdom that they probably shouldn't have yet. Finally, and then I'm going to end after this because I really do need to get back to my family. Thank you, everyone who has watched to this point. This video is dedicated to my father-in-law, our family patriarch, who passed away 2 nights ago. We will miss him dearly. And we already feel a void um, for the lack of his strength, and we're each trying to figure out where we step up to fill that in for the next generation. So, action steps in reaching your goals, right? It's great to know the end point, where you want to be at the end of this parenting thing. It's a good idea to know the different points we want to hit along the way. But then, how do we put that to action? What things do we do that make sure that we are putting an effort, a daily conscious effort into it, and to also assess as we go along if we are on the right track. It starts with setting up habits in, I guess, traditions within the family unit. Reading aloud to new children. Take that past year one and take it out of bedtime. Finish the book in the daylight. Do you know what I mean? Holiday things. They learn to be grateful by filling out thank you notes to everyone who gave them a gift. They learn gratefulness there. And it gets them more gifts. Because now these people are like, what? I'm going to buy you something else. Seasonal crafts, trimming the tree together, making the Easter eggs, that kind of thing. Every now and then go through photographs and put them in the scrapbooks together and say, oh, do you remember when we did this? And laugh and talk over the family photographs. Play dates, meeting together with families that are similarly minded, and having conversations with them. We don't all develop all these goals and things naturally. And some things don't even come into our radar. My lips don't even come into our radar until we've discussed with other people. So talking to other people, getting your kids together with families, and making sure that they have friends whose parents value the things that you value, because we're all a reflection of our crowd. Chore charts. It's so easy to just clean, and it is just so easy to set the children on the couch in front of Sesame Street while you clean and tell them to pick up your feet while I vacuum. But you know what? Have your house look a little crooked and have the children help you clean. You know what I mean? When they ask a question, don't just try to answer it. Sit them on your lap and Google it together. Open a dictionary, open a book, make them curious. and learn things on their own. And this is very important to education. And I mentioned last week about being an autodidact, someone who follows their curiosities and researches through that. Um, family dinners. You need to eat one meal a week together, at least 4 nights a week, because this is when you really get to connect with your children. I know life is busy, but you have to do it. Even if you're on the way to a sport and you eat it together in the car, you're still talking, right? Um, One of my favorite homeschool mentors, she wrote a book, and this title is this long. It's called Morning by Morning: How I Homeschooled My African American Sons into the Ivy League. That is the entire title. Um, they would read the newspaper every morning together, and then they would discuss current events from the newspaper. That's just a really good action step you can have to teaching that child critical thinking. What happened? Why do you think it happened? What else happened that caused this to happen? It's just super important, super important. So, yeah, just things like that. Just intentionally parent, intentionally put your time into it. Don't take shortcuts. Don't say, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. Do it today and do it often. So, um, I normally go an hour, but as I said at the top of the video, um, that I wasn't going to stay on long because my family is not okay and I'm kind of shaky myself. And I have errands to run to keep this week moving forward. But, parenting and the strength of a good parent um, have been on my mind. Um, and we're not all great parents, or we're not all great parents to young children. Maya Angelou said that her mother was a poor parent of small children, but she was the best parent an adult can have. So it's never too late to be an amazing parent to your children. My husband didn't know his father until he was 5. And for many years, he called him sir and that man because they immigrated from another country and the parents came ahead. And my husband was raised by a grandparent. And then when he was sent for, he cried for months to the point that they were about to pack him up and send him back because they thought he was having a mental break, and he didn't always get along well with his parents for this reason and just for other reasons, just being immigrants, work hard, parent harshly. But as adults, my father in law was a good parent to his sons. He really was. Sometimes he drove them up a wall, but they were good friends in the end. So, it doesn't matter how old your child is right now. Um, you can still parent them effectively at any age. Just think about the goals and what you want to help them with. And if they're above a certain age, some of these things are no longer your decision to make, but you get to ask them what their goals are. As parents of 20 somethings, my biggest goal is to give examples and to ask questions. Um, if they're going to do something new that they haven't done before and they seem a little timid about it, I just make sure that they've done all the thinking around it. Okay, so, all right, why are you hesitant? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And she's like, yes, yes, yes. Oh, maybe not that one. And so I'm like, okay, so now, well, you've thought it through, and I think you're equipped to go ahead and do the thing that you're planning to do. Off you go. And then sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, I'm thinking about this thing. And I'll be like, when I was your age and I did the thing, here's how it turned out. And here's where I messed up. And here's where I went right. Um, there are no secrets between me and my children because I figure what's the point of me living 25 years before they were born to not carry the stories with me to arm them with those things. Okay, so that is all for today. I appreciate you all. If you're coming to this live stream later, please leave comments. Tell me what you think. Give tips for other people. Ask questions. Maybe other people will chime in. That's all I have for now. So until next time.